Hello there, it's Detective DJ, and welcome to our weekly show called The Crime Crushers. We hope that you are continuing to enjoy our weekly episodes as much as we enjoy bringing them to you. This week, our story is called The Kidnapper's Kid. According to Ryan Martini, our resident crime scene specialist, well-known philanthropist and software designer Greg Napeyian has been found dead in his living room. He had been dead for at least 12 hours, and he had been found slumped in his easy chair with a novel in his lap. The novel was a mystery novel. Neighbors had been alerted to his house by a barking dog, and the police had been called. The fire in the fireplace had long since died, and a blood-stained poker had been found nearby. Boot prints had been found leading to and from the half-opened French doors. The perpetrator had brought a mixture of salt and snow into the living room, and the French doors to the patio had been left opened. Nothing had been disturbed in the living room. Greg Napeyian's 2 young boys and housekeeper were missing, and so too was their SUV. According to Dr. Shay Harrington, a resident psychologist, the perfect location for this crime was Greg's house, and this is where the suspect chose to commit the murder. The perfect occasion for this crime, according to Dr. Shay, was that Greg was normally home on most evenings and in his living room late at night after having put his 2 young boys to bed. Reason for Greg being there was that Greg lived there. So now on to part 2, and let's get down to some very interesting investigation here. At the present time, there are no suspects. Well, there are some characters that we might want to think about, but there are no suspects to identify. Here's what Chip, my right-hand investigator, has turned up. Greg Napeyian was a single dad with 2 preteen boys. Galen was 10 and Jensen was 8. Jensen had been adopted, and their housekeeper and nanny, Dahlia, lived with them. She had been with the family ever since Greg moved into the house, which was over 5 years ago. They had a large golden lab called Checkers and a beautiful white cat called Chesic. Greg had been a very successful software designer, and he was a very well-known philanthropist. He owned his own company and had been highly respected by members of his community. He was extremely generous, and his boys were the perfect kids. He was also a hockey and baseball coach, and the boys played both sports. Dahlia was originally from Europe, and the family adored her. She had often been seen at the supermarket shopping with the boys, and often drove them around to their appointments and activities. She had a few friends, mainly nannies, in the area, and her family was back in Sweden. She had come to America to find a job as a nanny, and had managed to hook up with Greg and his family through an agency. Greg never seemed too willing to say too much about his past, and this is what he had told his friends. His wife and younger son had died in a car crash. He had adopted Jensen to be a brother and playmate to Galen. He himself had a younger brother and sister, and they sometimes came to visit him. They lived in another city. For the past few months, Greg had seemed quite distracted. He had told his friends that he wanted to take vacation with his boys and Dahlia because he needed to get away for a while. He was not sure how long he and the family would be gone. He had recently set up accounts in 2 separate countries, and he had deposited large sums of money into these 2 accounts. A few days before his death, he had purchased plane tickets for the family and Dahlia. Well, again, we're going to look at possible suspects. Still no suspects. Cause of death: Greg was killed by a single massive blow to the skull and had died instantly. This is how I think it was done, based on the reports that I have received from my various investigators and my team members. The killing seemed simple enough. The killer simply entered through the French doors, and his victim was reading a book and did not hear as the door was softly pried open. By the time he realized that someone was nearby, it was just too late. The killer found the poker and wasted no time. He struck hard and connected. He had killed Greg with one single blow. He then exited back through the French doors and had disappeared into the night. Alright, we're on to part 3, believe it or not. Let me just summarize for you. Greg Napeyian, who was a very well-known philanthropist and a software designer, was found dead in his living room. He had been dead for almost 12 hours before he was discovered, and neighbors heard the barking dog and called the police. This is how they came to Greg's house. What else can I tell you about this? There is no reason that we could formally tell you about. We're still looking into it. Let me look at some very important questions that our friend Alex has drawn up for you. Was there something in Greg's past that could have come back to bite him? Could there have been any importance to Dahlia and the boys going missing? How about the setting up of accounts and transfers of large sums of money to these accounts? And how about the purchase of the plane tickets? Could Dahlia have known anything? All important questions for you to think about as you ponder what's going on. Here are some revelations for you, and hopefully this should help shed some light on this very unfortunate crime. Someone had been blackmailing Greg for the past few months. They had demanded a lot of money in return for his silence. They had threatened to harm Greg and his family if he did not pay up. Greg did not want to meet these demands. He had sent Dahlia and the boys ahead on their vacation, and he had been planning to join them as soon as he could. Before sending them off, however, he had confided his secret to Dahlia. A very distraught Dahlia had told the police everything after reading about the death of her employer in the newspaper. She and the boys had seen it on the TV and on the internet as well. The killer had been quickly apprehended at his home. His jacket contained long white hairs from Cheswick. The boot prints left in Greg's living room matched those of the killer, and the killer had not done a very good job at wiping his prints off the poker that was found in the living room. Photos of Greg and the boys had been found in the killer's home. Alright, so who did it and why? Well, let me end this story for you too. Eldon Holt and Greg Napeyian shared a past. On a pleasant summer's day, Eldon Holt had watched as Greg Napeyian spirited Jensen away from his home. A few months before this, Greg had lost his wife and his son Galen in a terrible car accident. His older son Galen had become inconsolable. Greg had become very concerned for Galen's well-being. He determined that he had to find a new brother for Galen. Galen and Jensen had been inseparable before the car accident. Now, Greg had lost Jensen in a car accident with him and his wife. Jensen and his wife had died in that car accident. Greg knew that it would take long to adopt a brother for Galen, so he took matters into his own hands. He did not have too much difficulty in finding what he sought. One day, as he was driving in his neighborhood, he saw Jensen playing on his lawn. And he loved the little boy immediately and spent the next few weeks observing him. He went to great lengths to find out as much as he could about the little boy. He found out his name and who his parents were. And then one day he made his move. He found out that Jensen's parents were going out of town on business, and that Jensen was going to be looked after by his nanny. Greg waited until the parents had left town, and on this particular summer's day, he had parked his car around the corner from Jensen's home. Then, as he walked towards Jensen's house, he made a phone call. He had pre-recorded a message and used a throwaway cell phone to make the call. When the nanny answered the phone, Greg walked quickly to the lawn where Jensen was playing, and then he took matters into his own hands. The rest was easy for Greg. He strode easily towards the little boy with a huge smile on his face, and he had dressed in clothes that had closely resembled that of a postman. He told Jensen that he had a package for him from his parents, and Jensen believed easily because he thought that Greg was the postman. They walked quickly towards Greg's parked car, and Greg opened the trunk of his car and showed Jensen a brand new tricycle. The rest was history. Eldon Holt watched as Greg opened his door and put Jensen into the passenger seat. Now, he did not think much of the incident until a few years later. He was leafing through a magazine when he came across a picture of Greg and the boys. They were featured in a cover story in a society magazine. Eldon knew that Jensen's parents had lost their son to a kidnapping incident, and Eldon hatched his own plan after that. He did not have much difficulty in finding out where Greg and the boys lived. He tried to blackmail Greg for big bucks, and he became angry when Greg refused to pay up. He resolved to kill Greg when he learned that Daly and the boys had left town. That's it. The Kidnapper's Kid. We hope you enjoyed it. We thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye now.